Next up, we have a wonderful person to speak with us, Margot Johnston of the Victorian Office of Medicinal Cannabis. Margot Johnston was appointed Director of the Victorian Office of Medicinal Cannabis in August 2016. A very fresh role. Margot is a lawyer with over 25 years' experience as an industry regulator across a range of industries, including taxis and hire cars, liquor and gambling, and the various industries regulated under the Consumer Affairs portfolio. I had a chat with Margot outside. She's a country girl from Echuca who came to the big smoke with obviously a passion to do something in her life with a lot of meaning and make some change in the world. Unfortunately, she's a Collingwood supporter, but we won't hold that against her. There's enough grief associated with being a Collingwood supporter as it is. So please welcome a courageous woman to come up and share some information with us. Margot, please welcome to the stage.
Good morning, and thanks for inviting me to speak here today about how we're going with the Victorian Access to Medicinal Cannabis scheme. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the people of the Kulin Nation. I'd also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present and any elders here today. Many of you would have heard my colleagues speak at the 2016 United in Compassion Symposium in Sydney. They spoke then about our newly established legislation. In relation to medicinal cannabis, an awful lot has happened since then, both in Victoria and throughout Australia, and indeed throughout the world. The Victorian Office of Medicinal Cannabis was established in August of last year. Since then, I've recruited a team of people to help me, and we've been hard at work setting up the regulatory framework, including data collection, clinical support arrangements for the Victorian Access Scheme. And we're very well progressed on all of those fronts. We're expecting to have the Access Scheme operating later this year to coincide with the availability of the Victorian Government's locally grown and produced medicinal cannabis product for our first patient group here in Victoria, which will be children with severe and intractable epilepsy. My team is also leading the formulation, testing and manufacture of this product, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. As well as the behind-the-scenes work, we're also talking every day to patients, carers and medical professionals and helping them to navigate the new regulatory and clinical landscape. August 2016 also saw the appointment of Victoria's Independent Medical Advisory Committee. This highly skilled and experienced committee, led by Professor James Angus, who's with us here today, includes a range of specialist physicians in neurology, cancer and pain management, as well as other experts in pharmacology, HIV/AIDS, medical research, medical ethics, drug safety, nursing and consumer issues. The committee is providing advice to the Victorian Government about the Victorian scheme, including the types of medicinal cannabis products that should be available to patients and clinical guidance for medical practitioners. A critical role for the committee in the future is to advise the government on the expansion of eligible patient groups based on a thorough examination of the available clinical research and evidence. This work will commence as soon as possible once access for the first patient group is established. Unlike arrangements in some other states, this committee has not been set up to provide clinical assessments of individual applications to prescribe medicinal cannabis. The Victorian scheme puts medical practitioners at the centre of the scheme, and they will make the clinical assessments about their patients in the context of their overall healthcare plan. As Minister Hennessy highlighted, much of Victoria's focus over the past year has been on developing a safe, reliable medicinal cannabis product for children with epilepsy. In 2016, the Victorian Government scientists conducted Australia's first ever horticultural trials of medicinal cannabis strains. They used cutting-edge research tools, including genome mapping and chemical analysis, to identify specific plant strains that are expected to benefit particular medical conditions. At the same time, the government established a world-class facility and processes to meet the good manufacturing practice standards required by the Therapeutic Goods Administration. Implementing these rigorous standards has taken time, but they support the government's commitment to ensuring that its medicinal cannabis product will be manufactured to the highest quality and standards. Detailed examination of the most suitable and viable cannabis strains for use in children with severe epilepsy continued well into this year. A final strain has now been selected and extracts of the harvested plants are being used to progress the product to the next stage. The Office of Medicinal Cannabis is working with world-leading pharmaceutical scientists to develop a product formulation that's suitable for a paediatric population. The product formulation is nearing completion and we hope to shortly move into product testing, including seeking ethics approval to test our product for the first time in humans. This testing is critically important to verify the safety and quality control of the product and give confidence to medical practitioners who wish to prescribe it. The support of the medical profession is essential to the successful delivery of our medicinal cannabis scheme here in Victoria. We acknowledge that this is very new territory for most medical specialists, and it comes with a lower level of scientific evidence than they're used to with conventional treatments. To address some of these concerns, we're working with paediatric neurology specialists to develop an innovative patient-centred decision tool to support best practice clinical care when prescribing the government product. This tool will allow doctors to more accurately assess how effective medicinal cannabis treatment is for their individual patients before deciding whether or not to continue with treatment in that patient in the longer term. Developing a high-quality pharmaceutical product of known composition and reliable dosage is a complex task. It takes time. But we're making strong progress and expect to provide the Victorian product via public hospital pharmacies in the coming months. Of course, this work hasn't occurred in a vacuum. As you're all aware, the medicinal cannabis landscape has evolved rapidly in Australia over the past 12 months. Changes in federal laws have had a big impact on our approach here in Victoria. The Victorian Government was the first entity to be authorised under the new Commonwealth laws regulating cultivation and manufacture. A Victorian company, Can Group, was the first licensed commercial cultivator in Australia. The Victorian Government has entered into agreements with Can Group to supply additional plant material so that we can scale up production of the childhood epilepsy product over time. Can Group has now been given plants derived from Victoria's unique cannabis strains to start this process. Changes to the scheduling of medicinal cannabis at the Commonwealth level, the easing of import restrictions and a more streamlined approach to Special Access Scheme Category B means that Victorian doctors are able to use existing pathways in Victoria under our general drugs and poisons legislation to prescribe imported medicinal cannabis for their patients now. The TGA recently reported around a month or 6 weeks ago that about 80 applications for medicinal cannabis have been approved under the Special Access Scheme Category B, and I understand that more than half of those are for patients based in Victoria. Many of these approvals are to treat epilepsy with Schedule 4 cannabidiol, which doesn't require any additional state approvals. However, we are also starting to see applications for Schedule 8 treatment permits for higher THC products to treat a range of conditions and symptoms. These applications, while made under existing drugs and poisons legislation, are being processed through my office, the Office of Medicinal Cannabis, to provide a streamlined single access point for medicinal cannabis applications here in Victoria. All of this is progress. I know that many of you are eager to see more change more rapidly to give more people more access to medicinal cannabis more quickly. I appreciate your ongoing enthusiasm and the role that it plays in maintaining the momentum for change. We hear stories every day from patients and carers that confirm the strong community interest in medicinal cannabis and the thirst for knowledge and experience on potential medicinal cannabis as a treatment for a wide variety of conditions and symptoms. I hope that over the next 3 days you will share your experiences and stories and learn more about the evidence and the science, and that together we will help to advance the future of medicinal cannabis in Australia. And I hope that you'll also take the opportunity to reflect on our progress thus far and how far we've come in a relatively short period of time. Thank you.